So you have a bit of extra money and you're wondering, should I just deposit it in the savings account? Should I get an RRSP or tax-free savings account? And you wonder which one's going to get you more money in the long run? Well, this video is all about this. So some people ask me, should I deposit my money into a tax-free savings account or an RRSP? So the whole mechanics of how they work and the different amount of contributions that you can do will be covered in a separate video. In this video, we're only going to look at the mathematical perspective of it all. Different ideas that we're going to cover is that both of them are mathematically equivalent if when you deposit and when you withdraw, your marginal tax rate is the same. And for another video on marginal tax rates, you could check out this one here. And then we're going to see that a tax-free savings account is superior to an RRSP in a situation where your income is rising. So if you deposit earlier on in your career and then you withdraw later on in your career when you're making more money. And we'll see that an RRSP is superior if you deposit in a period where you're making a lot of money and you withdraw when you're making less money, as in your retirement, which is the whole idea of the registered retirement savings plan. And then we're going to see that in a tax-free savings account, you can never lose. You'll always be better off than not using a tax-free savings account. You won't be losing money compared to just keeping it under your mattress or depositing it into a non-tax sheltered account. Whereas an RRSP may seem counterintuitive, but you could actually end up with less money if you don't play it right. So we're going to see all of those in this specific video. So first off, let's see why they're mathematically equivalent. So if I start with the general idea here, we have to make sure that we're covering this as straightforward as possible. And we'll make a few kind of like assumptions, and they're not big ones, but just bear in mind that there's little discrepancies just because of time delays. So if I start with my RRSP example, and I decide that I have $10,000 that I'm going to put in an RRSP, and that my marginal tax rate for this year, just to keep it simple, is going to be 50%. Well, out of that $10,000 that you contribute, when income tax season rolls in, regardless of what you owed or what you were going to get paid back afterwards, if you contribute that extra $10,000 and for that whole $10,000 amount, you're at this marginal tax rate of 50%, that means that this $10,000 will lead to a $5,000 return. So even though you contributed $10,000, you'll get $5,000 back. So in essence, if I think about like how you could live, how you could treat yourself to going to the restaurant or doing different vacations, well, except for this short time period where you put $10,000 and you're waiting, when you get that $5,000 back, it's similar to having contributed $5,000 in a tax-free savings account, because in both cases, whether you contribute $10,000, you get $5,000 back, or you contribute $5,000 for the following years, you essentially have the same kind of level of disposable income. So these two would be seen as equivalent. And I try to do this to try to show the differences in absolute terms, but if you just want to look at it from a percentage standpoint, well, you don't really need to assume all of this. So let's say we go down a few years, and let's say your return is 10%. Well, in both cases, you get 10%, and let's just keep it simple. You're only contributing this for a year. So this 10%, even though it's the equivalent of a $5,000 tax-free savings account, you have a situation here that you have 10% on this 10,000, so you now have 11,000. Whereas over here, you have 10% on this 5,000, which is 5,500. And then you decide to take this money out. Well, how much money do you end up with when you take this money out after a year? Well, we're assuming that you still have a 50% marginal tax rate. So the registered retirement savings plan kind of postpones the moment where you owe this income taxes. So here at this period, you'll have this 50% that you'll owe on this 11,000. And if you take 50%, you'll have 5,500 left. In the tax-free savings account, you've already paid taxes on those earnings. This is your earnings after taxes that are there. They're not sheltered beforehand, but afterwards, all the gains that you make are sheltered, so you end up with the exact same amount. This is the situation where your tax rates don't change. So now let's just kind of use the same numbers, same deposits, same interest rate, but now let's say that your income tax rate, your marginal income tax rate is going up over that period of time. So let's say all of a sudden your income tax rate is 60%. So if we had 60% here, well, out of this $11,000, you would owe $6,600 in income taxes. Therefore, you would keep $4,400. And in this scenario here, that doesn't change anything. You still have $5,500. So you could see that this scenario here is superior in a situation where your income taxes have gone up from 50 to 60%, which I stated in the introduction. So you could see that in this case here, you're actually ending up with less money, but you're actually ending up with less money than you kind of contributed initially. Like this was the equivalent of a $5,000 deposit that it saved, and in the end you end up with less money. So this is not attractive at all. So if you expect large increases in income so that you're switching income tax brackets and you're investing in a short period of time, this is not attractive at all. Don't do it. But if your income taxes is going down, your income tax rate is going down, which is typically the case if you're going through retirement. So let's say now you have like 20% income tax rate. Well, at 20%, you would owe $2,200 of this amount. And out of that amount, that means that you would keep $8,800. So now you're in a situation that this is vastly superior to $5,500. It's way better. But this has been a massive drop in income taxes. It could have been like 40% would have made more sense. Then you would have owed slightly less amount. You would have owed $4,400. You would have kept $6,600, but it's still superior in the tax-free savings account. So the big question that you have to ask yourself when you're deciding whether you go for a tax-free savings account or an RRSP is, when are you planning to deposit that money? What kind of income are you earning? And what kind of income are you expecting when you're going to take this money out? If you're depositing the money to buy a boat in a few years' time, or to buy something that you want to treat yourself to and you want to generate some income over that period of time, the tax-free savings account is going to be superior unless you're deciding to take a gap year to year that you take that money out and you're making no income or very low income. If you're planning to do this for retirement, RRSP definitely superior. If you're in a year that you didn't get much work, you're kind of like a lot on unemployment, and you're not making much money, but you have a bit of money aside, and you decide, oh, I could buy an RRSP, but this is a period for you of very low income, and you think, oh, I might take it out before my retirement, definitely don't use an RRSP. It seems enticing to get that money back because you see that $10,000 that you deposit and you get some of that money back in your income tax returns. But we've seen in this example here that you could actually end up with less money afterwards if your marginal income tax rate is going up. So those were the general ideas, making sure that you understand both where they're good for, where they're bad for. And then you could also compare them to a non-tax sheltered account. In this situation here, let's say we had that same 10% income on it, that interest rate. Well, from $5,000, I'd go to $5,500, but on that $500 of gains, I would owe some taxes. So my after-tax return is always going to be lower than that percentage that you see in what you get. Like that nominal percentage is going to be reduced because you owe some of that money to income taxes. But naturally, you can't lose in that situation either. You don't gain as much, but you can't lose. So if you're hesitating between RRSP because your tax-free savings account is maxed out, well, as I mentioned, if you expect your salaries to go up drastically, don't. Even if you expect them to go up a bit, don't. If you expect your salaries just to go up with inflation, then it's a non-issue because, well, if you look at the marginal tax rate video, you'll notice that brackets, how they evolve over time is they typically go up with inflation. So if there was a $50,000 to $100,000 bracket, well, after a few years, because of inflation, it might be a $52,000 to $104,000 kind of bracket, because we adjust those brackets for inflation. So overall, in this video, we've noticed that a tax-free savings account is superior to an RRSP if you have a situation where you're depositing money and you're withdrawing it in periods where your income tax rates are the same or if they're increasing a little bit. However, there is an instance where it might be interesting for you to contribute up to $25,000 in an RRSP, and that is the home buyer's plan. This will be covered in a separate video, but it may be very interesting to take advantage of this when you're buying a home to save other fees. Well, let's leave that for another video. I hope you guys found this interesting, the mathematical comparison of RRSP versus tax-free savings account. I'll be happy to cover more topics along these lines. Just check out the other videos in this category. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real-life examples. Have a good day.